Hello, wise guy. Haven't seen you in a while. Family's alright, I hope? I've got an important thing to discuss. You probably remember, there's no ex-mafia. And if you did forget, then I'll remind you what family means from the very beginning. I will also tell you why the studio has every chance to go all in, and perhaps hit the jackpot. And most importantly, why Mafia 4 will completely change the franchise. The birth of the series. So, the birth of the Mafia series began in the year 1998 in a small studio by the name of Illusion Softworks. This first game was made by only 9 people. The early stages were not too smooth, the gameplay was very monotonous, and the game was supposed to become an analog of the Driver series. Even the name of the game wasn't thought through, and the developers went with just Gangster. Luckily for the players, it didn't happen. In the year 2000, several new members joined the studio, including an artist and a screenwriter, Daniel Vavra. The exact man became the mastermind behind the game. With new people, the studio decided to remake everything from scratch, make a new engine, and diversify the setting and gameplay. Huge work was done on the plot. The devs wanted to create a story in which there would be a place for action, drama, human, and everyday life situations to make the game more realistic. Considering that during the development came out games such as GTA 3, where the plot was extremely simple, many members of the studio began looking at the complex scenario of the game with skepticism. But Daniel Vavra was unyielding. In his mind, the game was supposed to be a product for more mature and thoughtful players, and not just an open-world sandbox. Mafia: The City of Lost Heaven, an unexpected legend. The first game, which was titled The City of Lost Heaven, came out in 2002. It immediately set the bar for quality of story and atmosphere and became a cult classic. And by this day, the first game is accepted by many as the best in the series. And even though many similar games are called a GTA clone, Mafia stays as a distinct and original product. The story. The game takes place in the 30th of the 20th century. It tells the story of Tommy Angelo, in a fictional city, Lost Heaven, who works as a taxi driver at the start of the game. A series of events and fateful accidents brings him into the criminal world, where he slowly accumulates more and more influence and trust from the Don. At one point, he himself becomes a noticeable player in the criminal arena of Lost Heaven. Just like the devs wanted, the project turned out to be very atmospheric and was more akin to the criminal drama The Sopranos than a standard action with racing and shooting. What made it great? The game was interesting not just by its plot, but also its diverse gameplay. It was a great mix of racing, shooting, and good story that wasn't written just for show, but immersed the players into a dangerous but interesting inner world of a mafioso clan. The PC version for the game received positive reviews from the critics. Even though the writer Daniel Vavra felt that they could have made the game even better, he was happy with the end result. Mafia 2: Born in Pain. After 8 years, in 2010, Mafia 2 came out. By this time, Illusion Softworks became part of 2K, and now the game was to come out under that sign. Just as cinematic and atmospheric, the game went through a production hell. As it happens with big cinematic projects in Hollywood, the first problem was choosing the engine. Because of this, the game was remade at least 3 times. But the biggest blow was the departure of the main screenwriter. Throughout the entirety of the development process, there were many conflicts between the members of the team, and Daniel left, then came back, and in the end forever left the project. But his scenario wasn't rewritten, and that meant that ideologically, the game stayed loyal to the first game. Only if Tommy from the first game became a part of the criminal world almost against his will and almost always felt himself like a fish out of water, Vito from the second game always threaded a line with the law. And if Angelo could have avoided getting into the criminal world altogether, with Vito and his friend Joe, it was just a question of time. The story. The second Mafia takes place in the 40th to 50th years of the last century. The plot tells us about the making of a gangster, Vito Scaletta, in Empire Bay City. In the spirit of the first game, he shows how hard and dangerous getting into criminality is. Throughout the game, we see how Vito, from a regular watchdog, turns into a cold-blooded and a venerable cutthroat, even though with principles. He is helped by his friend Joe. On their path, they are awaited by many shocking moments, the main of which happens when Vito finds out about the fate of his best friend. This twist has the right to be called one of the best in the industry. Technical moments. A real challenge for the developers was portraying the years, since the game took place in 2 different times. The culture of those times changed quite dramatically, and the devs needed to show that in the game, and they succeeded with that task. Another aspect that improved was the graphics. A huge amount of details was pleasing to the eye. For example, animation of the snow in the winter locations at the start of the game, and generally high detailing of the world. The atmosphere stayed, and even though critics found the game to be an order of magnitude lower, the players loved the game just as much as the first one. Moreover, the game got 3 DLCs, which told us about the adventures of Joe Barbaro and a character by the name of Jimmy, who has no ties with the main plot. In December of 2010, exclusively for Russia, 1C released Mafia II Special Extended Edition, which came with all 3 DLCs and several special costumes. After a year, the same pack was released for the Western market under the name Mafia II Director's Cut. Mafia III. From mafioso to vigilante. You could call the third game a conventional Dusk of the series. It was released by the Hangar 13 studio, which was formed pretty much just before the release. And when the previous games were called GTA clones, an entourage of 30th to 50th, but were remarked for their originality and unlikeness to Grand Theft Auto, the third game has nothing in common with Mafia, and all that reminds us of the original series ends on the name's game and presence of Italians in the plot. Even Vito Scaletta from the second game couldn't improve the situation by much. Technologically, the game came out crude. Many players complained about bad optimization, FPS drops, lighting issues, outdated graphics, and generally plastic game world. Seeing this, the developers immediately released several patches, which fixed much of the issues. But the first impression was already lost. The story. Separate mention deserves the plot. Scenario of the game was not written by the ideological father of the series, Daniel Vavra. His place took William Harms, who before wrote scenarios for Dead Island Riptide and Infamous. Now the game takes place in New Bordeaux, a graceful fictional city just like in the first 2 games. The story introduces us to Vietnam veteran Lincoln Clay. He is something like an ethnic analog of Terminator and John Rambo. The vibe of the original Mafia with its tragic dramatism is only present in the first part of the game, after which it becomes another typical revenge-oriented action. Our hero, with help from his allies, one of which, by the way, is Vito Scaletta, throws sand in the wheels of the local mafia, destroys or robs their important structures, kills hundreds of soldiers, and brutally murders the higher-standing members. Sometimes it even reminds us of one gloomy man with a skull on his shirt, called Frank Castle. And after taking all of the city's districts, Clay finally reaches the main enemy, and obviously brutally punishes him. Difficulties on the technical part. The game went far from its roots. First of all, this game isn't about mafia, but about destroying the mafia, and this phrase could be taken in 2 ways, both story-wise and series-wise. Second of all, a huge accent was put on its open world, instead of the plot. And if the world is interesting and picturesque, you will soon find out that Covers has nothing behind it. The city looks dead. The developers said that the directors are at fault, as they were not given enough time to check and polish everything. In reality, the gameplay challenges the player, and the player has to accept that challenge. Quite interesting, even though unusual for the series, the plot mainly gets to us through the use of cutscenes. Many players agree that just for those cutscenes, it's worth suffering through the gameplay. The game has the worst reviews in the series. Also, several DLCs were released that tell us about other adventures of Lincoln. Daniel Vavra, in one of his interviews, stated that the studio didn't accept his drafts for the third game. He commented on the game in quite a modest way, only joking that his scenario was too cool for hangars, which is why they didn't accept it. Remakes and remasters. A remake of the first game came out in 2020. Just after that came remasters of the second and third games. Remake of the first game was received mostly positive. Both critics and players felt that Hangar 13 took the release of the game with deserved respect and slightly broadened the plot, which only improved it. Other than improving the graphics and a couple novelties in the gameplay, the dialogue was also improved, which made the characters look even more alive than in the original. As for remasters of the second and third games, they did not get as warm of a reaction. Many said that the remaster of the second game was not really needed, and the third one didn't need one at all, as it came out just 4 years ago, and there were no major changes in the game. The main issue with both remasters is bad optimization and no global improvements, and that's how the story of the trilogy ends. What's known about Mafia IV? As of the end of 2021, the fourth game is in development. That being said, news about the game being developed were around the web since 2017, but that was mostly just rumors and leaks. In 2019, some insider closely related to the developers from Hangar 13 told Reddit that the game is on its final stages of development, and that in 2020, the world will see a teaser trailer of the new project. It was also known that Take-Two Interactive, which own Hangar 13, registered 3 trademarks for a possible Mafia 4. Mr. Vavra says hello. There was supposedly a leaked story about the game taking place in 17th in a city like Las Vegas, and the heroes for the first time in the series will be two characters simultaneously, a cop and a criminal. The goal of the first one would be catching and bringing to trial the second one, but this leak could not get any factual support. If we dig a little, we can find an old interview of Daniel Vavra, where he said that he wrote such a plot for the third game, and that was the plot that was too cool for hangars. Mafia IV: Arguments Against. There are several other things that tell us that expecting Mafia IV to come out soon is not a good idea. Too little time went from the release of the remasters, and as we know, the series are known for their deep and elaborate plots, which is practically impossible to write in 1 to 2 years. And also, there were no direct confirmations from the developers themselves about the game, and that's the main type of news to bring discussion and predictions. On the other hand, it's not impossible that the game is being developed secretly, as other projects are being worked on in parallel. After all, insider information is not always just a bunch of lies. Mafia IV: Arguments for. One of the latest news about the fourth Mafia is dated by November 2021. If we believe the source, supposedly close to the developers, the game is being worked on and is soon to be released. The publisher 2K Games also hinted that they're working hard on releasing a couple huge sequels for one of their most renowned series. Moreover, they stated that Hangar 13, after releasing the final DLC for Mafia 3, began creating concepts for the fourth game. And even though the project stopped almost for a year due to internal disagreements in the team, the development process is still going. That means the fans can expect news or maybe even a trailer at the start of 2022. It's reported that the game will come out on PC, Xbox, PS4, and PS5. Also known that Mafia 4 will be on a much bigger scale than the previous game in every possible way. Another feature of the future game, it will work by the here and now principle, with no time travel. The main goal will be creating your own criminal empire through buying or taking land and building all kinds of establishments there. Conclusion: all these new features, if implemented correctly, can change and even revolutionize our view of the franchise. And let's not forget about the plot, as it always was the speciality of the series, making it not just an action, but a real interactive film that gave the players an unforgettable experience. We're waiting for an official announcement from the devs and believe that the fourth game will really be grandiose in every aspect. And on this note, the table comes to an end. Don't forget to leave a like and share this video with your friends. Stay safe and see you soon.